Welcome to Grace Abounds. I'm Pastor Emily Baton. Today, I will be sharing with you my Sunday sermons from St. John's Lutheran Church in Palm Desert, California. Thank you for joining us, and may you find grace, peace, and comfort in the message today. Today's gospel, Jesus is at the house of a leader of the Pharisees. Now, how he got invited to this banquet, I don't know, because Jesus is more at odds with the Pharisees than he is not. Maybe they were trying to trap him. Maybe this was a keep your enemies closer kind of situation. Maybe they were just curious. Though in truth, Jesus was not that far off from a Pharisee. He was a rabbi, well-versed in the scriptures and law, as he would have known well the proverb read today. Do not put yourself forward in the king's presence, or stand in the place of the great, for it is better to be told, come up here, than to be put lower in the presence of a noble. Like the leader, Jesus also had disciples that followed his teachings. And the Pharisees may not have seen Jesus as an equal, but when he sat down at the banquet table, he was well within his right to sit towards the head of it. The only real difference between Jesus and the Pharisees is that Jesus spent most of his time teaching outside the temple, among the people. And so we get to Jesus' point, when he interjects with an observation. Now, important to understanding Jesus' remark is the societal rules of Greco-Roman formal meals. Though the guests gathered are mostly Jewish, they lived under Roman rule and therefore were influenced by its practices, like seating arrangements at a banquet. These meals would often take place at a U-shaped table. Each guest would be assigned a seat at the table to demonstrate their rank and social standing, the highest rank being at the center and the lowest farther out at the table. You can see how our own formal gatherings, like weddings, have a similar layout. Now, can you imagine being at that banquet when Jesus calls out everyone gathered, including the host who invited him, with a hypothetical story about a banquet where the guests presume themselves to be more important than they are? I personally would have been mortified. But Jesus was making a point about humility and to discourage a similar Roman understanding of relationship merely being reciprocal. He was dismantling a trait that often irked him about the Pharisees: pridefulness. Now, when I think of pridefulness, there is one particular person in my life that comes to mind. And his name was Dr. Charlie Zeal. Now, Dr. Zeal was graduated med school at George Washington University. He was a general surgeon and went on to be chief of surgery. He took on cases no one would touch, confident that he would be the one to pull off that miracle. Dr. Zeal expected the absolute best from others, just as he did for himself, and he suffered no fools. Here is a picture of Dr. Zeal when he was still in med school examining a model skull. He's the one standing in the middle, just there. And so, this is Dr. Zeal, but this is not the man I knew, nor the name that I called him. You might be able to see the family resemblance. Like me, he also looked 12 in grad school. And I met him, or rather, he met me decades later because I knew him as Grandpa. And what a grandpa he was. He used to visit us every few months, no matter where we lived. He could always make me laugh, played games with us kids, especially cribbage, where true to form, he never let us win. And he never lost a chance to use that incredible mind of his, always quizzing me. Now, Emily, how many weeks should you wrap a sprained ankle? And I would respond, 6 to 8, same as a fracture. And he would nod, beaming. I grew up on stories of his glory days as a doctor, painting a clear picture of Dr. Charlie Zeal, the one that I think captures what it would have been like to work with him the most, or even worse, work under him, is a story that was told to me in this way. Dr. Zeal, chief resident at the time, along with 2 other residents, had just come out of a 24-hour surgery. They had a little break before they were going back on rounds in the morning. So being extremely spent, one of the surgeons and residents said to Dr. Zeal, "I'm tired. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee before the next shift." To which Dr. Zeal said, "Well, if you are so tired, there is no need for you to come back. You can go ahead and get all the rest you want." And he swore that this resident would never see the inside of an OR for the rest of his rotation. Now, the resident was moved off his service and did continue with his study, but my grandpa refused to call him doctor from that day forward. I often felt bad for that resident, or anyone who got in the way of my grandpa's ego, not to mention those poor nurses who had to work with him. I wonder if even Jesus himself could have knocked Grandpa down a couple pegs as Jesus did for the Pharisees. But Jesus, too, did not suffer fools. And when he saw the Pharisees upholding the social hierarchy and assuming themselves at the top, he had to say something, reminding them that it is not the power that is gained on earth that will sustain them, but the blessings of God by which they are to be lifted up. For Jesus' power came not from knowledge or status, but in weakness. That Jesus humbled himself even to the point of death on a cross. And in that moment of utter defeat, it would be the same moment of triumph over death as weakness becomes strength in the grace of God. A lesson that may have softened my grandpa's response to the residents' exhaustion. But this was not the only story I heard about my grandpa, Dr. Zeal. I remember after his funeral, many of the people he worked with were telling stories, including nurses and even that same resident who had stayed in touch nearly 50 years later. They spoke of how many lives Dr. Zeal had saved, at his utter devastation when he couldn't, head in his hands, a position he wouldn't move from hours. Patients of his recounting his kindness and compassion, how he was different from other doctors who were too busy to truly listen. They said every time he came into the room, he would pull up a chair next to the hospital bed, look at you with those bright eyes, and you knew that he cared. This is the image of my grandpa that I hold most dear. I swore I wouldn't cry again. Because it is so important. It is a posture that I inherited another family resemblance. It is the exact way that I enter a space of pastoral care. And every time I do, I honor his memory, his person. Dr. Zeal may have had an extremely prideful personality and not much humility, but he knew how to follow Jesus' other call from the gospel today. He knew how to meet people where they were and expect nothing in return. For not only is Jesus calling out the Pharisees for their pridefulness, but for who it is they invite to the table. Not seeking out only those who will gain you more, but rather reaching out to those whose need is great and will gain you nothing but grace in community. This is our banquet table, where all are welcome and every place is one of honor. So pull up a chair and listen, for Christ is here. Amen. Thank you for listening. Each week's episode is edited by Nick Cox with music by St. John's Worship Band. This week's sermon is by me, Pastor Emily Baton. Make sure to subscribe, and if you would like to know more about St. John's mission to know Christ and make Christ known, please visit our website at stjohnslutheran.church. May God be with you this day.